introduce myself in my language. I spent the last few years during the pandemic really trying to get myself together to learn my language. And so my teachers are all younger than me, and they're just amazing. So everything you saw last night was really our story of how we're reclaiming much of the language and all of our resilience to do that. And I won't get choked up here today because I just have such high regards for the folks sitting up here. So I just want to quickly say that, first of all, Ihani Washte, Itaki api makasi tomi amaniwi, Imachi api kishto, Lori, Daya Yauhe, Cecilia. Daya Yauhe. How are you? Good morning. So, and I have to really behave because my Ina's in here. Miss Cecilia Fire Thunder is my Hunka mother, former tribal president of the Oglala Lakota Nation, so I want to lift her up. And I'm going to get started because we have about a little bit of time. But I want to just say about First Peoples Fund's Community Spirit Award. We have honored over 100 honorees now since the founding of First Peoples Fund in 1999. And the Community Spirit Award is really an award that acknowledges those that are selflessly doing work in community. Those who just are taking the time to really be diligent about protecting the natural resources in their communities. And many of them today have to travel a lot further from their original territories to gather their materials. But these are the knowledge keepers. These are the ones that folks cherish in their community. And I have the honor, except for Ed up here, to really get to know them. And Ed is our newest Community Spirit Award honoree at Carriere, Suquamish. And Elaine Emerson is Colville. She's from the Colville Nation, and First Peoples Funds has a long history with the Colville Nation. And Ed and Elaine are connected through the the Northwest Basket Makers Alliance. And when I first started learning about the Basket Alliance, there was probably a good, handful, and now you go to their sessions some 20-some years later, and there's over 700 weavers there, and at least 300 of those are young people. So the younger generation really is wanting to learn. And so these folks are highly guarded, highly cherished in their communities. And my dear sister friend here, Theresa Secord, and I, we've been doing this work for a very, very long time. And I met Theresa on the Honor the Earth tour back in the day when she was a geologist for her tribe. And we were standing up for the river there on her reservation through the Indigenous Women's Network. And she was the geologist, and this woman gifted the folks on the tour a corn basket. And the story you heard last night of the people of the dawn, the first to greet the dawn, and how that arrow went into the ash, that story came to be because of the relationships on that stage, became to be because of our relationship with our family of artists over the years. So we didn't just make that story up, the last year organizing it, and it was really thoughtful, beginning with the language. So I just want to add that too, is you hear folks saying that in the circle, Sharon Day, who was on stage last night, said, to learn your language when you're younger, when you don't know it, the way to learn it is through ceremony, right? And that's usually our first entrance to come home. And so these folks have, at young age, at least the first two have grown up understanding the language. They knew the language when we couldn't speak it because of the boarding school system. And so their parents really taught them at a very, very young age, to hold on to that language, hold on to their culture, regardless of what was happening in and around them, which as Indigenous folks, we all know what that is, right? The destruction of our communities. And so I'm just going to have a conversation, and then I want to ask each one of them, and I'll start with Elaine. And Elaine and I had about an hour visit of catching up after about 5 years. And but what I know of Elaine is that her family and her mother and father ensured that she was going to know her ways. And so since meeting Elaine from when she received the Community Spirit Award, probably about, I don't know, 15 years ago now, she's still doing the work in community, still doing the work in community. And when I spoke to her the other day, she was just being asked to work with the tribe and some, this thing we call land back now, right? To go honor some land that was being restored and given back to the tribe. But when things like that happen too, we're a little bit hesitant, because we're like, okay, what does that really mean if we take this land, right? So Elaine just told me this wonderful story, but I'm going to just give you a couple minutes, Elaine, just to introduce yourself and say hello and good morning to everybody, and hopefully everybody's had their coffee or juice or whatever. Thank you, Elaine.
Yeah. Waikas kakao Talik and Lynn Suquamish. I said in my language, good day, I'm very happy to see all of you. And yeah, I am from Washington State, in central Washington, probably very far north. We're probably 40, 50 miles from the Canadian border. And yeah, I grew up in a very traditional family, learning a lot of the things that I do from my parents, not only them, but the elders around me, you know, because it seems like Native people, you know, they raise youngsters, you know, like they say, you know, a village raises a child. Wherever you go, you know, you're always having like elders or relatives there guiding what you're doing, you know, so that you know, get to learn about everything, about not only about the work that you do, but environment. And I don't remember like how I first learned how to speak my language, because I just grew up knowing it. I heard it, you know, and I didn't start teaching classes or working with our tribal language group because I think we started in 1998, something like that. It was way back then. You know, to try to revive it. And it's really difficult to do anything with it or with our different culture, you know, ways, because our tribe is quite large. Our reservation covers about 3.5 million acres, and we have there 12 different tribes, 3 different languages, 3 different cultures, and 3 different religions. So when you're trying to teach somebody, you know, it's difficult to try to get the ones that come from your background, you know. Sometimes they intermingle. That we've worked on that department. I've been there about, this year is 27 years. And it's been, yeah, and we work not only doing classes or cultural things right out of our language department, but we also work with neighboring schools. We have had like language teachers in the surrounding public schools, and North Wenatchee Valley College, which is an outreach of the college out of Wenatchee. We work with those college people, with college classes. And cultural classes, either informal, and I come in real strong with that because I am a basket maker. And that's probably my first love because I like doing it, you know, not only doing the weaving, which is very relaxing, that we have an informal group of people, I think probably close to 20 years. We just get together when we feel like getting together. You know, we read, and I did it because all of the art was disappearing. You know, nobody did the work anymore. And then when you ask the elders to help you or tell you where to get the materials, they were then quite reluctant to do it. They won't tell you a lot of those things because of the problems we had, you know, like with assimilation. Yeah, it was wrong to do that, you know, different, you know. So, but we went and journeyed ahead and did it and been very, very successful. We have a group that comes in from Canada that's real strong with us. You know, the border is there, but as Native people, we don't see that. You know, we have relatives on the other side, they have relatives down where we are, you know. We speak the same language, do the same culture, you know, and we work together, but they had not had baskets made, they said, for 400 years. The type of weaving that Ed has there, they said they bought their baskets from over the Cascades going west. So they wanted to learn in order to teach their own people, and we worked with them, and they've been really successful. They've taught classes up there, and then they learned how to gather the material, the whole bit, you know. But I think the hardest part of doing something like that is trying to get the material. You know, it's difficult, especially for our tribe, because so many of our bands were forcibly removed, you know, from their homelands, and we were not allowed to go back to get the material in traditional places. We had to work with forestry department, you know, those kind of people to let us go in to find the material, you know, and they let us do it, but it's never the same place. And we've done it all of these years, you know, that I thought it was really a really successful thing to do. Half of the battle of doing that kind of work is collecting material. You not only have to know when to get it, what time of the year to get it, where to get it, and then also with us, like the religious implication. You know, we also teach those as we're going about doing the whole process of the basket work. Because the people have lost it, you know. And they were impacted a lot now, not only with these diseases going around, but also with climate change. It's really taken an effect, you know, because up there we're basically, you know, like we're a little higher elevation and it's very mountainous. And it's taken effect like on a water system, somewhat, you know, and trees and all of that.
Elaine, I'd like to hold on that about the natural resources and the gathering, because we're going to have a conversation on that. So hold that thought there too around how you're gathering materials today versus how you gathered them, you know, more than 20 years ago, or how your parents gathered the resources. Because I know it's getting harder and harder just to get even access to land, and then the fires you had right recently. So yes. Why don't we just pause, and then we'll have Ed introduce himself and say a few things, then we'll have Theresa, and then we'll come back around with the questions. But that's one of the, based on what you have been going through in your community, I want to make sure that we come back on and talk about the access to natural resources and the importance of those and the issues around climate change in our communities. So Ed, I would like to just have you, Ed Carriere is one of our Community Spirit Award honorees. Just take a few minutes to introduce yourself and where you come from and how you got here. Thank you. Maya.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's just overwhelming to me, the see all the people that were there at the show last night. And well, on my little reservation on the Suquamish, Fort Madison Indian Reservation in the Saley Sea there, just across from Seattle, our tribe kept getting moved because we were in Seattle, but of course we got chewed out of there. And then they send us across the bay to Suquamish, and then they even took our reservation land away there. So our tribe got broken up in the Puget Sound area there. Well, my great-grandma raised me. My mom gave me to her when I was an infant, or when I was really small. And if I had been raised by my mom or my grandma, I would never have woven a basket. But my great-grandma was taught by the last chief of the Suquamish tribe. And so when I was, 6, 8 years old, 10 years old, I would watch her weave those baskets, I'm talking about these clam gathering baskets. They were real important to our people because we dug a lot of clams and lived on clams. And you could put them in that basket and you could take them out in the water and wash all the sand off of them, the open weave, and the strength of the cedar limb, the limb off the tree, and the cedar root. The limb is the body of the basket, the cedar root is the width. So I call it the limb and root basket. And so I got watching her, and the old Indian way was you had to learn by watching. If you asked questions, you were in trouble. So when I was 14, I got brave enough to make my first clam basket. And boy, I used that basket for 3 years, digging and gathering clams in it, and before it finally fell apart. I wish I would have saved that. I threw it away. But back then, we had to dig clams to earn a few dollars. They paid us 6 cents a pound, so for a 100-pound sack full of steamer clams, we got $6. So that was but back in the 1940s, that was $6, you could buy something. Now you can't even buy a gallon of gasoline. So that was kind of and then the land that I live on in Indianola, Washington, which is the Suquamish and Indianola, part of the Suquamish reservation there. I was born right there on that property and lived there all my life. So I was able to learn gathering all the fibers to weave with, and how how to use them after you gathered them and all that good stuff. So my duties as an elder is to pass this knowledge along. So that's what I try to do. I try to teach and show and tell, go to high schools, go to grade schools, just different things like that. And
I wanted to say that when I was, that folks nominate artists, culture bearers from all over the country to receive this award, and the stories they tell of the honorees, you feel like you're there with them because the person nominating them has so much love for them. And Dale's here with us as well, but one of Ed's traveling buddies. So he said so many wonderful things about you and your nomination. And one of the things that Ed has done is he has woven over 600 baskets. So imagine those 600 baskets that he has woven, the number of those that he has also taught, right? And that ripple effect and that impact throughout his community. So I want to thank you, Ed, for that brief introduction, and then I'm going to go over to Theresa here, and we'll come back through with their questions.
And after all that weaving, my hands still work.
Those hosts for me. Dungak, everyone. Miluwes Tele Secord, Uzinadakad, Banawamskig, Wabanagiag, Naga, Peskamukadi, Gakimin, Zoom, Dwayne Toma. I said greetings, I'm Theresa Secord. I'm a member of the Penobscot Nation from the land of the Dawn, the Wabanaki, and what is now known as Maine. And I also said that I'm a student of the performer who opened the whole show last night, Dwayne Toma, who's a fluent first language Passamaquoddy speaker. I was looking for him earlier, nervous about my pronunciation. And he was, as he said, singing along with those 1890 wax cylinder recordings that are the oldest. They are from his nation, another sister tribe to the Penobscot Nation, the Passamaquoddy tribe, and they are the oldest known recordings of indigenous voices in the world. And then when they were discovered a few years ago, he was among the language keepers who was invited, as well as some now Passamaquoddy MIT trained linguists, to go to Washington, D.C. and help translate those and work with those. And so, you can just imagine the moment, how proud he was. But it was also exciting, too, at the end of the ceremony, just filled with all the spirit of the entire performance and all over Indian country and all the artists that First Peoples Fund has recognized and lifted up. And so we're all tired, I think, from just being so filled with that spirit. I have worked as a basket maker, of course, and but also I'm known as the founding director of the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance, was another similar organization to the Northwest Native American Basket Weavers Association, where I met Elaine and Ed. And for almost the whole 20 years that I worked with the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance, First Peoples Fund lifted our artists up at the same time and sent us out, helped us network with the other weavers, with the leadership of the other organizations. Bob Lane, of course, is the president of the Northwest Native American Basket Weavers Association, and he and I have known each other for a long time. He's the vice president of the board at First Peoples Fund. So what I'm trying to do here is, I guess, weave in the enormous support that First Peoples Fund has given to artists. The reach is so long across Indian country, all the way from Maine to Hawaii and, Washington State and down to the south as well, as you saw last night. So my work with the basket makers, with the 4 federally recognized tribes of Maine, we set out now 30 years ago to save the endangered art of our basketry, which is ash and sweetgrass, among the Maliseet, Mi'kmaq, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot tribes, and we did. We lowered the average age of basket makers from 63 to 40, and we increased numbers from around 55 founding members to around 150 today. And now my passion is continuing to help move those basket makers forward with language work and advocacy and things we'll talk about later. But I can't overemphasize the work with First Peoples Fund. I've benefited personally as an artist, as a mentor, as a trainer, a fellow, former board member of First Peoples Fund, Community Spirit Award recipient, and Lori as a visionary and First Peoples Fund has always known how to help lift up artists and support and helping send, and then I'll end with this, but launching our young basket makers that came up through our organization in all those years into the national spotlight, into the national Indian art markets, and becoming, very successful contemporary basket makers today. So, appreciate all the support.
Sorry, I say when I'm thinking, so raise your hand every time you say and we'll keep track of those But Theresa, that's Theresa, right? She starts immediately going outward to all of those around her that not only lifted up her, but that she lifted up. And yes, we do. First Peoples Fund has a very long relationship with many of these organizations. So we went from way west, or kind of the Cascades area, east of the Cascades, and started way west on the shores, and then we went all the way to the people of the Don, as you learn. How many went to the show last night? Oh, good. So you're feeling the energy today. Thank you. So again, part of that story last night also consisted of the three folks that were talking up there. That was from Tlingit territory down to Pueblo territory, and then, all the way, where else did we go? Oh, to the Siletz tribe. So we really wove in the story of the weavers and the potters. Those are the Community Spirit Awards. So that part of the production last night was their story. And also their challenges, the challenges that they face in community because of federal Indian policy. So that was really important for us to tell that. And as you heard in the story last night of the weaver who wove herself, she wove through 3 wars and continued to weave, right? Continued to weave, and then even through termination of their tribe. One day waking up and the federal government says you're no longer a tribal nation. And she continued to weave. And I think that's just the joy that we have at First Peoples Fund for these 3 individuals. And they're just steadfast, right, in their work. So, I want to just ask the next question that I really want to ask is just reflecting back now for all of your contributions to community, all your contributions to sustaining culture, all of your love for your family and your children and your parents, because Elaine will tell you today, I do this work because it was important for my parents and they wanted us to know it. They wanted us to keep teaching. And so she told me the other day that she was called on to come and offer a prayer, and she, kept going around it, and so that she's telling the next generation, it's your time, it's your time. So, Elaine, I just want to ask you, in reflecting back and all of this work, what brings you most joy today? Looking back in terms of thinking as a child and growing up, and the work that you committed to doing, what brings you joy about what is happening on the Colville reservation in that home with the next generation?
Now or then?
Now, reflecting back and moving forward.
Because it all kind of it kind of runs together because the joy of it all, for me, like I said, I grew up in a traditional home. And we learned things early on, like going through grade school, or like for a time at that boarding school, they were really hard on Indian people because they were really strong in assimilating us into the white culture, That was with the grade school, and then high school was pretty bad, even though it was local, and then in college it was also bad, because then it was, remember, 60s, and it was civil rights movement, everybody was involved in this racial thing, that I think the joy of it with me is like, I got to see all of this, the traditional ways, you know, and then doing all of the different arts. And as the years went on into the civil rights thing, they were losing it completely. And one day I just all of a sudden thought, hey, nobody's doing this kind of thing. Well, it was actually forbidden. You know, if you spoke your language, you were punished. If you did your culture, you know, you were reprimanded. This was in the 1950s and 60s. And during our formative years, you know, it was really hard. And then I thought one day, well, nobody's doing that. Maybe I should try that, you know. So I was going to surprise my mom, and I dragged out some cedar, and I put the little basket together, and I went down to her house, and I said, hey, I said, look at this, look at what I did, you know. She was the one that taught us how to do that, you know. And she took one look at that. She said, you're going to have to tear that apart. She says, you went the wrong way. See, because of anything we do, we go to the right, you know, and my basket went to the left. It's little things like that you learn, you know. And the joys of it all is like working like over 20 years, seeing the interest with the students, you know. They like doing it, and they love going out to collect the material, you know, because I think it's a really special thing to do, because the material's hard to get. You know, you can't go back to the homelands because you're not allowed, or overpopulation, you know, or poisons usually wiped everything out, you know. And we go sometimes like maybe 90 or 100 miles one way just to find it. And in my mother's traditional area, it's like that, and it's only like probably 40 miles from where I live, up and over the mountains, you know, that we could not go back there until just recently. And it's things like that. You try to teach your students the why it's so special, why you have to hang on to the religious part of it and everything, because I think it's important, especially the younger people, learning where they come from. Where they come from, you know, what they do. It gives them like a grounding to know who they really are, you know, as a person. And you say, and it's hard, like going through this assimilation thing. We lived it. We lived going through that, and it's very, very difficult to get through something like that, you know.
Well, you know, Elaine, what I love what you say too about the unraveling, or you did it backwards, because all of the conversations that I've had with the First Peoples Fund's Community Spirit Award honorees, it's those that are teaching are the toughest on you, right? And those that love you the most are the toughest on you. So I've heard that story across regions and across tribes about so-and-so, you know. Dolores Churchill tells that story of her mom unraveled her first 30 baskets, right? So she went over to learn to weave like the clinkets as well, you know. So there's those hard lessons that make you stronger today, right? To then pass that knowledge on, right?
And then I wanted to say, working not only with the language, but I have been with our tribal language department. On our reservation, we have 3 different languages, 3 different cultures, and 3 different religions. And I'm involved with the Okanagan language program, and it's progressing quite well. But we talk about assimilation problems, you know, not only with the language, but with our culture. We do like everything there, not only baskets, but making teepees, you know, and we're getting more into working with tules, cattails, because we have it available. It's a traditional thing to do, but it's sometimes difficult to get the young people involved, you know. I think it's a psychological thing You know, because when people go through assimilation and the punishments and stuff like that, they're reluctant to teach their children because they're afraid. They say, we don't want them to go through what we went through. We're not teaching them. Don't you teach them, you know. It's a difficult thing for us to go through now. So I was thinking, it didn't dawn on me. I had a brother that was in Vietnam. And, you know, he was a happy-go-lucky type of person. And when he was going to come home, military people came to our homes and they said, you gotta watch out, don't make noise, you know, be careful about cars having these backfires, you know. If it's sleeping in a room, make noise a little bit, make sure he's awake, because he's going through this mental thing, you know. And they said he was taught to kill. And I got to thinking about it, you know, and he said it was pretty bad when he was there, and that mental thing, you know, made him a different person. I looked at him and I thought at first, that looks like my brother, but it acts like a different animal, you know. It was pretty bad. And so I got to thinking, now look at our people. Of 11 different tribes, 7 of them were forcibly removed by soldiers onto that reservation. They did not have anybody coming there. No military, no government, nobody came in there to say, it's okay to be an Indian. It's okay, we will help you get over this, you know. Nobody came, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe that idea comes down and we're trying to teach through that problem. In language, we see that very, very strong, you know. The older people refuse to come in, and if they do, they're very reluctant about it, you know. And the younger ones don't know because nobody taught them. And they're anywhere from 35 to 80 years old. And the younger ones, some of them are the ones that are coming through. They want to learn, they want to get in there. Those are the ones who really work at it.
Well, thank you for that, really sharing that story, you know, because what you started, you said, you know, it really began with my parents wanting us to hold on to who we are as Indians, right? Who we are. And then again, the system comes in, you know, and your brother had to go through that experience, you know. And so I would love to learn more too also about, you know, where he is in the family structure now and how he's come through that in relationship to, you know, so hold that with you for a moment, and then I'm going to ask Ed to think about responding to Elaine, what she just said, or if you want to respond to the question of reflecting back on the work that you've done for many years now, what brings you joy today that you see in the next generation, you know, doing this good work. But if you feel you want to respond to Elaine, you can do that as well. Thank you.
Well, today, if I'm going to teach someone, say, to weave this clam basket here, well, I want to teach a person that's going to try to keep weaving. Like, I'll teach someone to make a clam basket. They'll come to the house and we'll spend 4 or 5 days making a clam basket. And then that person never does anything with it. He's satisfied that he made the basket, or he or she, and then so I like to make sure that the person is going to continue to make these baskets and maybe actually teach someone else. And so I found a young man from the Squaxin Island tribe, Josh Mason, that after he spent a 4-year apprenticeship with me, he's going ahead weaving and he's teaching at other tribes, and he's doing really well. But she mentioned about the language. My great-grandma wouldn't teach me the language because she was punished in boarding school for speaking the language. So when she was raising me, why, had she tried to teach me the language, the Lasutseed Suquamish language there, why, I know I could have picked it up. But now that I'm old, why, I just can't pick it up.
No, thank you, Ed. And then do you also have other young mentees that you're working with besides the young gentleman? Is he now going out, the young gentleman that you work with, is he passing that on to in his own community, what you're teaching him as well?
Well, we're in the process of making a tule mat Indian shelter house at our Suquamish Museum. So I took a group of young people out and we harvested the tules last summer, and then this winter, and have been teaching them how to sew those tules together to make these tule mats to cover this tule mat shelter that we're gonna build at our museum. So they've been doing really well sewing all these. We got to make a lot of tule mats to cover that whole house.
Thank you. So Theresa, I'm going to come back over to you and you can reflect on what they said or speak to really what is bringing you joy working with your sons and now your family, because Theresa's like given, like she said, 20-some years of her life outward, right, and building and working collectively with the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance, and just observing her, you know, I see her now going within the family and going within to really learn the language. So maybe Theresa, if you could just share about where you're at right now and this cycle you find yourself in.
Thanks. Well, I guess, I'm still kind of like all over the place in that, even thinking last night about the trajectory of all the work in Indian country, with the trauma certainly that was reflected in the performance, but also the resistance and the resilience. And so in my own work, I'm of course still mentoring my apprentices, but I'm also working in language revitalization, which we keep talking about these last 3 days, which is remarkable because 20 years ago, people weren't talking about that, there wasn't support. And so now there is, and we heard from Dwayne last night, he is a first language speaker. There are dozens of Passamaquoddy language speakers, and so we're very fortunate. I am learning that language, which is related to my language, the Penobscot language, but my basketry teacher was known when she passed away I was working with her in 1993, she passed away in 98, and she later, we found out she was the last known first language speaker of the Penobscot language. And so this was the quote in that story last night, and so a lot of those words were, really obviously ringing true. But she also told me when we worked together for 5 years that you will never truly be a basket maker until you can weave in your language. And so that is what is driving me and bringing me joy now that I'm beginning to. I'm in an apprentice model again with my cousin she's been studying Passamaquoddy at the university level in Maine for 2 years. And I said earlier, I've been on Zoom for 2 years. And so I work with Dwayne, and there's a couple of Passamaquoddy MIT trained linguists now. You know, so we don't just have white linguists anymore, we also have our own linguists, which is really remarkable. And so that brings me great joy in that through my recent First Nations Development Institute Loose Indigenous Knowledge Fellowship that I'm able to share basketry, beginning to learn the basketry terms again myself. I heard a lot of them in the workshops that we funded and worked with the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance elders like the great Molly Neptune Parker. But we were always teaching like these huge community workshops with hundreds of people, you know, wanting to make baskets, and it was really difficult to also focus on the language. And so helping to develop a curriculum and basketry terms, which are really fast falling into disuse. Molly was our president, who's also a Community Spirit Award recipient. She died 2 years ago. Her obituary was in the New York Times. You know, she was a really important matriarch of our group and of our tribes in Maine, and you know, one of the last basket makers who also knew all the language and the terms. So anyway, that's what I'm really focused on right now. So like Lori said, I am doing my own thing because I've been interested in that. In the 35 years I've been a basket maker, can I learn to weave in my language? And I'm doing it, but I'm also helping still in the communities, and we just started our on-site workshops. We're sharing that.
Also, your kids and your niece and
my sons, I continue.
Granddaughter would be or granddaughter?
Yeah, as I'm sure you know, Elaine and Ed can relate. It's not really even optional that my son became a basket maker, and but it's you know, it's something he really enjoys, and I also take great pride in the next generation of basket makers that we help kind of raise up. And you know, they took the basketry in a whole different dimension. I'm still weaving like things that my great-grandmother wove. I'm weaving on wooden forms that were handed down to me from the 1800s. So my basket makers' baskets look like they were made like the turn of the last century, that basket makers like Jeremy Frey and my son and others are innovating and taking this wood. It's a remarkable wood that we can weave with. It's like the silk of the basket trees. And we also weave braided sweetgrass in our baskets, and they're taking it in a whole different contemporary art form, which is really beautiful.
Well, now that you're saying that, taking it into more of a contemporary art form, maybe we could just go back to the original about the natural resources. We have now, just time check, it's 10:54, but maybe if you each could just share something about the natural resources that are available, and then those that you're becoming more and more concerned about, and how you're adapting to what other resources are out there. So maybe Ed, did you want to start? Did you?
Well, I just wanted to say, I try to encourage more men to weave, because usually it's the ladies that weave, and I don't find very many men weaving the baskets. And a story that my great-grandma told me, the man was allowed to weave the bottom of the basket, and then the lady took off up the side walls of the basket. Well, when you think about that, the basket is sitting there, you never see the bottom of the basket.
Elaine, do you want to respond to that, or do you want to answer the question around the natural resources, or do you want to talk about the important work of women in our communities and encouraging the men to get it together? Hey, just kidding.
Well, I don't know how to add on to that, we try to teach, like history and stuff in the things that we do, and then also like include like words, language, or whatever. And I like to work, like doing a class, we're constantly talking, you know, and then I try to tell them a little bit about the histories, go back into the old folklore, you know. So we use that a lot with what we do, like we have stories about the owl went around like collecting bad little kids. You see, we use these stories to like teach kids how to behave, you know, teach them morals and all. And we in our area carry the coiled cedar, like the berry picking baskets. And like those, and then the owl would go along and he would collect all the bad little kids and haul them off to the end of the world and then eat them up. So we tell those stories that scare the little kids, you know. And then and the story goes, so the owl collected all these little kids and flew off with them. And there was a little boy and a little girl in that bunch. The little boy had a piece of flint, you know, in his hand. So he cut a hole in the bottom, you know, part of the way around that big basket, and they got away, you know. So we use things like
I love that story because I was thinking, okay, the bandits like that one.
you know, not only the things we're doing today, but also, you know, the stories that go in the background. Because we were taught by what we call chaptics, that's actually the legends, and to us they're a law. You know, you have to grow up according to those stories, you know. So when you look at a basket, there's many, many different stories about them, you know. The three different sizes we have, like the smalls, the mediums, and the large, you know. Each one of them has different stories to them or different religious implications, you know. And we were taught a lot about, I think kids now don't have a really strong work ethic. We were little and that was during the war years, remember the 40s, everybody was poor, even the white people, you know. So my parents would pick up all the old people down around the fort and we'd go camping to get berries. And we'd go out and then the women would tell all of us little girls, you take your little basket, you go over there and help Washawai or Kumaltak or one of these old ladies until she filled up her basket, you know. And those baskets are huge, you know. And as a little kid, and I look at that and I think, my God, you're never going to fill those up. And Mom would say, you fill that, help her fill that up and then you can go play. Yeah. So anyway, they had all the many baskets sitting out there. So we'd go out and work our heads off, you know, and when we got done and all of us little kids go off and play. And we learned that when we were very little until we got into our teens, the whole bit, you know. So all those things, you know, line together about how we grew up. And we're trying now to teach our kids that, you know, the kids. And it's difficult. Yeah.
Well, thank you, thank you.
I got a little bit of addition to that. When I was about 4 years old, we went to the hop fields to pick hops. And my great grandma would have me out there, you know, and she found this little hop barrel about that big that I could just barely see it. So I picked a hop and put it in the barrel. Some people ask me, well, when did you start working? Oh, you know, 3 or 4 years old.
I can barely see inside the basket. Well, Theresa, I'm going to leave you with some closing words if you'd like to share. What time are we ending?
I think we started on Indian time, so we might have 5 minutes if people are patient.
Is that good?
Maybe. maybe
So,
I
yeah, I didn't know if you want to talk about the sweetgrass or, just in terms of.
Well, what I could do is scoot us to the
Thank
last
you.
question.
Thank
I wouldn't want to speak for others and so, but I'll start with saying I'm sure that we're all, facing dire consequences with our natural resources due to climate change. The emerald ash borer beetle is killing all of the ash trees in our part of the world. And of course, you heard last night our creation story. And so we're losing the weaving material and the source of our very genesis in our area. And then the sweetgrass, a lot of invasive plants. Ours only grows at the coast. We have a different species there that we weave into our baskets, and these are stories that we were given permission to, because I've talked about this, a lot of people have said, oh, you're not supposed to weave with sweetgrass, that we have ancient stories that have given us permission. And anyway, so sea level rise, etc., is destroying the sweetgrass beds and our traditional harvest and of that. And so I guess I just wanted to maybe say that, we're resilient as Indian people and like everybody, and we'll adapt. People are already weaving with additional materials and things and trying to make the best of the situation. So maybe we could finish on that, on climate change and positivity.
Well, I think we're at the end of our session, and thank you all for sharing your story. And I know folks probably want to get to the next session. And I just want to point out the artwork over here. Ben Pease was painting that last night at the reception. And so that's the final piece that's on the, there's a card out there, and if you have the new fancy iPhones, you can scan it. And you'll see the work on there, the other artwork. So Ben's one of the First Peoples Fund's fellows as well. And Sherry said to me last night, you didn't even introduce yourself. I said, yes, I did in my language, but so my English name is Lori Pourier, and I'm the president of First Peoples Fund. So I just want to say that at the end now. And thank you all for being with us today, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day. And let's give a little thank you to our